Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me, make me, break me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Will you please be seated? And let's see if you have remembered the sermon from 2 weeks ago. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Well, you're getting better. But listening to the grand music today, particularly going straight into the Gloria and then the gospel procession to and from the altar, reminded me of a little venture that some parishioners and myself went to last night. We went to Disneyland in all that rain and we were thoroughly drenched. But the point of it was to follow on from a sermon that I preached here about storytelling from the Disney characters and from the parables. But the wonderful thing about it was the majestic music when it came to the light show. It was as triumphant. There was that feeling of the resurrection and the ascension and all that. And the characters, they all have something to say about the way we live. Where has the last 6 weeks gone? It's been an exciting journey since the resurrection on Easter Day. And every Sunday since then, and every weekday at the daily Eucharist and reflection on the radio, the gospel reading for the day has exposed us to the proofs and encounters of the risen Lord. And our sermons through Professor Cater and Professor Percy had said, we too can experience the risen Christ here and now in the people we meet, in the things we do. Christ is present. And that glorious gospel reading. Oh, there's a whole list of things there: love, peace, unity. And again, that reminded me of Christ being present in things where we don't think he's there. I belong to an organization called Rotary, and they set up an international movement around the world in several universities to study peace and reconciliation and world relief and development. And it just so happens we have one university in Thailand, in Australia, and in New Zealand, and we have the chair of the New Zealand one sitting with us today, right down in the front pew. And so there is proof of the resurrection. Christ working through people and working through an organization like Rotary. Of course, you'll get your skeptics and say, pooh-hoo, Rotary's only for people who want to go and have a drink and some fine food once a week. But it's a very hard working institution, and it doesn't have barriers. So, we have also seen and heard stories about the risen Christ here and now, as I said. And we have been encouraged to be witnesses of the resurrection through our daily lives and how we relate to our friends and family and work and community. We have been asked to bear fruit, to love one another as I have loved you. It's a pity we didn't take more notice of that. And on Thursday, as we celebrate the ascension of Christ into heaven, we are commanded to go out to the whole world and proclaim the good news of Christ. It's like witnessing the performance of a world-class musician, actor, or athlete. We're often tempted to see the individual as a different class of mortal from ourselves. This person is a genius in a class of his or her own, someone touched by some miraculous brilliance that has bypassed us, lesser mortals altogether. Now, though it's true that it makes great gifts to be a record beater or any sort, the greatest performers will say that most of their success is built on every ordinary and boring repetition of low-level tasks. The public see for a few moments of glory, but no longer the hours of practice, the pain and the weariness and frustration of staying with the task, well beyond any feeling of satisfaction or achievement. But if we turn to Mark's Gospel, it is like the grand final of a concert, crowned at the end with fireworks and a fireworks spectacular. Well, we didn't have the fireworks last night. They couldn't do that because of the rain. But we certainly had the drums and the trumpets and the cymbals and the dragons and you name it. It was there. And there was that excitement, which I'm sure we should have when we leave church on a Sunday, because Christ is risen, and he's risen indeed. Now, Jesus sends his disciples out on a mission to conquer the world. No small task for just a few ordinary working people. In case they are feeling apprehensive, he promises that their mission will be accompanied by astonishing miracles, which will surely convince all who witness them. They will heal sick people while suffering no harm to themselves, even in deadly danger. They will speak in tongues, and Jesus' disciples as they overcome all evil. Yet we know that from the beginning of the church's life, Jesus' disciples faltered and failed, suffered and died. They were human beings. Was he just talking big to get them going and psyching them up? Or was he perhaps wrong in his predictions? Or are these promises about recognizing the hidden strength and transformative power that lies within the exercise of everyday virtues? The apostles did spread the gospel, after all, and people are living that gospel thousands of years later. You see, we live in an era of celebrity culture and are used to following the lives and achievements of the rich, successful and famous people, and this tends to make us fail to appreciate the dedication and steady practice behind the performance. It can also make us fail to see the heroism and huge achievement all around us as ordinary people, people like you and me, live out their commitments of love and personal value, often at great cost. Several years ago, only 2 I think, the whole world stopped while in Thailand, in a remote village, a group of schoolboys in their rugby team were trapped in a cave for over 14 days. They were going to die. There was no way to get them out. But the people of the world rallied. Scientists, rock climbers, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims. They came from everywhere. And they got these young men out. Sadly, one person lost his life. But they didn't go round mourning and crying. They were sorry. But they were attracted and inspired by the heroism and them coming together. Surely, the presence of God was in all those who came together and stopped the world for so many days and rescued these people. Our God is an amazing person. At the ascension, Jesus' disciples were still fixated on a kingdom model, on the pattern of empires around them. But the God who chose to be born in a stable, live as a carpenter, and die as a criminal is operating on a different model. The gifts of the Holy Spirit are often modest in their practical expression. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control tend not to hit the headlines. But Jesus' ascension into heaven is part of a process whereby his followers became gradually enabled to embody the gospel in their own lives. Jesus' life and death illustrate God's saving plan for the whole of history. And from the moment of his rising, Jesus reassures us that he will always be with them. The signs of his presence are modest: bread, wine, water, and oil. The living out of the daily gospel is often unobtrusive and apparently unrewarding. Yet anyone whose life has been touched by someone who truly lives the gospel knows that a transformative experience that can be. In my own country, we are plagued half the year with torrential floods and torrential fires. Houses, farms, shops being destroyed. Now, in some countries, they'll say, get the salvos to come. But who's coming out? It's Sikhs with turbans. They have a whole force of caravans, and they set up youth kitchens. They provide meals, soup, care. There are some countries in the world that would want to go and do otherwise. They are living out that gospel today. Something to think about. A person who is close to Jesus may not look like a genius or a media sensation, but such people have a star quality which is unmistakable. And I'm going to include Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck in that. We learn from them as we do from the parables. They are living examples of what goodness looks like. And we are surrounded on all sides by everyday miracles in signs of the kingdom. We meet them in those who are in public service of all types and in any kind of self-gift of one human being to another. Jesus comes into the world quietly and leaves it in his human body mysteriously. In his ascension, he seems to confirm his presence among us by disappearing. But we can experience the power of God's indwelling spirit without having to see it. And this is the greatest miracle and treasure of all, freely available to anyone who asks for it. Our task is to ask for it daily and to embody the gift in our everyday living. Did you know one of the largest missionary organizations in the world is a religious order, and they live in Melanesia, and our friends from New Zealand would know them off by heart. The Melanesian Brothers. They go 2 by 2 to anywhere in the world and do exactly what that gospel today proclaims. It's exciting. They have about 300, 400 brothers. And then they have the sisters of the church as well. The church is not alive. It's not dead, my friends. It's alive and well. And today, in almost every corner of the world, there are Christian believers who proclaim the saving power of the risen Lord. But it is no longer in Europe or the civilized world that this growth is primarily taking place. Indeed, in some regions, sadly, numbers are dwindling. The main growth is to be found in the newer worlds of Africa, Latin America, the Pacific, Asia. There are two conclusions we might draw from the history of the church's expansion of faith. It depends on self-sacrifice, not the me movement, me. As Jesus reminds us, a man can have no greater love than to lay down his life for his friends. And secondly, that this self-sacrifice does not produce unhappiness. Quite the contrary. Missioners often remark today that the unhappy people in the world are those who are dependent on material possessions. Wealth is never an evil in itself, but so often it does produce unhappiness and boredom. The church is successful today where Christians are dependent for the warmth and love of each other, not on efficient central heating or air conditioning or other trappings of material prosperity, but on one another and one in Christ. And I just end this with one little verse from a hymn. It was written in 1854 by a man of the name Frederick William. We have sung it here a few times. It's got a lovely ditty tune. But the second verse goes, "For the love of God is broader than the measures of man's mind, and the heart of the eternal is most wonderfully kind. But we make his love too narrow by false limits of our own, and we magnify his strictness with a zeal he would not own." Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.